I'm Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research for Vistage, and I'm happy to host the latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. This series brings the most trusted experts to the Vistage community, those who provide exceptional insight and best practices to help you navigate new challenges and possibilities. One possibility we've been talking about for the last few years is artificial intelligence. Small and mid-sized businesses are increasingly embracing this new technology, and our presenter has been there to support your journey by sharing insights in the Vistage Research Center and as a speaker at Vistage Groups. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, has written 7 best-selling books. His most recent, titled ChatGPT for Thought Leaders and Content Creators, Unlocking the Potential of Generative AI for Innovative and Effective Content Creation. The one before that was titled Returning to the Office and Leading Hybrid and Remote Teams, Another Challenge that we have gone through in the past few years. Now, in addition to the Vistage Research Center, he has published over 650 articles in prominent venues such as Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Fortune. His cutting-edge thought leadership has been translated into many languages. Dr. Gleb's expertise also comes from over 20 years of consulting and training. His clients include Fortune 500 companies ranging from Aflac to Xerox. His expertise also comes from his academic background as a behavioral scientist. Dr. Gleb taught for 8 years as a lecturer at UNC Chapel Hill and 7 years as a professor at Ohio State. A proud Ukrainian American, Dr. Gleb lives in Columbus, Ohio. In his free time, he spends abundant quality time with his life to avoid his personal life turning into a disaster. To help you take advantage of his groundbreaking expertise, he's been invited to share his insights about AI for small and mid-sized businesses in his presentation, From Frustration to Flourishing, Mastering Gen AI Adoption. We do have some polling questions for you as attendees, so get ready to respond. Welcome, Dr. Gleb, and over to you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Anne. Really appreciate it. Okay, everyone. Welcome. So, unlike a typical presentation with PowerPoint, you'll be able to see me and the slides on the screen at the same time. So they'll be to my right and to the bottom. If you don't see them clearly right now, what I suggest you do is you make sure to put the screen to full view mode, whether you're viewing it on your phone, whether you're viewing it on your laptop, on the screen. So make sure to have full view mode so you can fully see it. Now, Anne mentioned I published a book on this topic, ChatGPT for Thought Leaders and Content Creators. And that book, not selling this book, that book will be available to everyone who wants it for free. Now, people who are currently watching the webinar will have a poll opt-in to see if you want to get the book at the end of the webinar. And that's also how you will get the slides. So you'll get resources like the book and the slides and a free coaching session with me. If you are watching this as a recording, and I know I've talked to many Vistage chairs who I presented for and who want me to present for them, who said that they'll be watching this as a recording. In order to get the resources, you'll want to go to the link you could see right under me right now. So tinyurl.com/DAE event. Again, that's tinyurl.com/DAE event. Also, this will be in the chat. And so you can check it out in the chat, just link to it, tinyurl.com/DAE event for a copy of the slides, for a copy of my book, and other related resources. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Without further ado, let's talk about generative AI adoption for Vistage members. And I'll be using some case studies from Vistage members within the presentation so you see what I'm talking about. First, let's talk about the overview. First, on the presentation, we'll talk about understanding generative AI and its benefits. So generative AI, understanding of it means comparing it to previous versions of AI, machine learning, and then the differences with generative AI and the benefits, along with some case studies of how Vistage members are adopting this technology. understanding what the common challenges are to generative AI adoption, let you know to overcome them, learning how to provide a safe learning environment. And with generative AI technology, it's quite a bit more important to focus on a psychologically safe learning environment, which Amy Edmondson, my friend, talks about, because it's very important for your employees to learn about this tool effectively and adapt it. And Amy Edmondson, she, I think, was presented for Vistage. She endorsed my book, and she is really insightful on this topic. So check out her research on creating a psychologically safe learning environment. Then cultivating effective communication and getting employee buy-in. So after you create that safe environment, how do you communicate about generative AI effectively? Because unlike other digital transformation projects, the biggest obstacle I've seen with generative AI adoption is not the technical, not the structural. Those are all big obstacles. You need to overcome them, but the psychological. And again, there's a lot of fears that people have around generative AI. There was a recent poll showing that over 2/3 of people, 72%, want to slow down or stop generative AI development, and they're anxious. Of something like 80%, over 80% are worried about generative AI causing real problems. And so your employees are part of that 70, 80% that want to stop generative AI development, that are worried about it causing serious problems. And you need to understand how to get their commitment and buy-in with this technology. So different from other change management and technological projects, both because your employees are quite a bit more afraid of it than other technologies, and because it's a lot more complex to implement. So with generative AI as a tool, requires a lot more efforts from your employees to figure out best use cases for your company. It's not like Salesforce or some kind of ERP product where there's a standardized approach to it. You need to have a lot more engagement from your employees to figure out the right use cases. Then, of course, we want to talk about ensuring compliance and mitigating the kind of risks that are unfortunately pretty powerful with generative AI. So we'll talk about that. And finally, what are the specific steps for developing a comprehensive adoption strategy for small and medium enterprises? All right. Without further ado, let's talk about number one, understanding generative AI and its benefits, which are many. One is to optimize the workflows for your team, make them quite a bit more efficient, meaning using less resources to do the same work. Supporting strategic business initiatives. So whatever initiative you have, if you want to grow your sales, if you want to cut costs, if you want to figure out, enter a new market, generative AI can help. Facilitating innovation and competitive advantage. And generative AI is surprisingly innovative. It's a great brainstorming tool. You wouldn't think of, if you're used to traditional machine learning, that's not a great tool for brainstorming, but it's a really great innovation tool to generative AI, very different. And then competition. You want to get ahead of your competitors, and definitely lots of leaders are thinking about how to get ahead of their competitors. And if you're not using generative AI effectively, you're just going to be left behind. There's no question about it. So right now, for Georgetown University Press, I'm working with Georgetown University Press to write a book for them. And I was just going through the research on generative AI development, so recent peer-reviewed research. Very clear that generative AI, depending on the area, it improves your efficiency by anywhere from 30% to 50%. And that's just reducing the resources required. It's not even talking about becoming more effective, doing the work better. So it reduces costs pretty significantly. Boosting organizational performance. All of these help improve your organizational performance and your bottom line. And that enhance your functioning and efficiency. So thinking about the functioning and efficiency of any role in your organization, for most of these roles, you will be able to enhance the functioning and efficiency, especially of lower level automatable tasks. Now let's talk a little bit about generative AI versus machine learning AI. So machine learning is the traditional modality, machine learning. So traditional machine learning AI, it's based on statistical methods and pattern recognition using structured data. So you need a lot of data, often not something that SMEs have, that middle market companies have. It relies on labeled data sets of extensive data to train and have supervised learning techniques. So you need to have a lot of investment into training and learning. It focuses on prediction, classification, and regression tasks. So for example, if you're a large bank, you can predict what will be the right loans to make and classify various categories of folks into good risks and bad risks and make better decisions in there. Operates within defined parameters and limited creativity. So I talked about it's good for prediction within defined parameters, not so creative. Now, in business, it's used for forecasting trends, customer segmentation, risk assessment. It supports fraud detection. So banks I talked about, insurance, predictive maintenance in large companies, and supply chain optimization. Enhances decision-making for data-driven insights and process automation. So if you need to make a lot of decisions, let's say about giving small loans to people, that's a great use case. And there have been a number of apps that have quickly given loans to people using generative AI as a way to, machine learning AI as a way of evaluating whether they're good credit risks or not. Improves operational efficiency with scalable and repeatable models. So if you have a model that you can easily export, you can use this tool effectively. And requires a lot of data and substantial investments to get benefits from it. What about generative AI? Well, it utilizes advanced neural networks to generate new content from learned patterns. Fortunately, you don't need to provide the neural network data. It already is pre-trained on the whole corpus of the internet, whatever tools you're using, whether you're using tools like ChatGPT with OpenAI, whether you're using Microsoft Copilot, which often relies on OpenAI, whether you're using Anthropic's Claude, whether you're using the Gemini, whether you're using Perplexity, you're using Grok, you're using DeepSeek, might not want to use it if you're don't want your data to be exported to China. So whatever tools you're using, it's already pre-trained. It's based on unsupervised and self-supervised learning methods, which is much, much cheaper to do, basically, than the data labeling by individual humans. Capable of producing human-like text, images, and other media outputs. Incredibly effective. My book talks about that much more extensively. Again, not selling my book. Everyone who wants to get a copy of my book will get a copy of it. If you're present on this video conference, and there'll be a poll at the end, or you can go to the link I shared earlier, tinyurl.com/DAE event to get a copy of the book and the slides. It emphasizes being creative. It's very innovative. It has language understanding and synthesizing content. So there's a lot of things that you can do with it. It requires much lower investment and less data. So it's very accessible for middle market companies, for small and medium-sized companies. In business, it powers automated content creation, marketing, copy, and personalized communications. I mean, how much of your work is involved here? Enhances customer service with intelligent chatbots and virtual assistants without much additional work on you. Supports innovation, product design, and creative strategy development. A lot of creativity by using generative AI, and provides decision support by summarizing complex data into quickly actionable insights. If you ever use something like a Zoom call summary, you can see that it's already integrated into a number of tools, or Microsoft Teams summary. Key differences. Traditional machine learning versus generative AI. The traditional machine learning analyzes and predicts data, predicts everything what you want to know based on pre-existing data, whereas generative AI creates new content, new ideas. Traditional machine learning requires well-structured, extensively labeled data. Again, that's a pretty big investment, whereas generative AI relies on broader, often unstructured data sets. It's best for traditional machine learning is great for optimization and risk management, whereas generative AI is good for creative customer-facing solutions. Both can be complementary to improve your overall performance, but SMEs will generally get more benefit from adopting generative AI than traditional machine learning. Let's talk about a manufacturing client I worked with to adopt generative AI. It's a Midwest manufacturing company with about 200 staff, just under that. It's recognized for operational excellence and innovative mindset even before generative AI adoption. They hired me to assist with adoption of generative AI to transform their core processes, including optimizing production scheduling, quality control, and administrative tasks. So that's what we want to do. So what we did is we had a phased approach from pilot projects to full-scale integration. You always want to start with pilot projects. So here's what we did in year one. This was a couple of years ago. Discovery and assessment. We formed a cross-functional generative AI task force. That's really valuable because you need to have a lot of involvement and you need to have data from different teams with engineers, production managers, IT, quality assurance, and HR. We had a comprehensive audit to look at mapping their processes and time tracking tools, to look at production scheduling, quality control, and administrative tasks, the things we were focusing on. And so that highlighted some high impact areas for generative AI intervention. We had weekly innovation huddle sessions to implement ideas. And here's what we did in the first year. So there were some pilot projects. We launched a pilot project on one production line out of that manufacturing plant with a scheduling tool, quality control system, and administrative report automation, with integrating elements of both machine learning and generative AI. So machine learning, especially for quality control, was useful for predicting repairs, but most of it was generative AI. Pilot outcomes included a 14% reduction in downtime, again, on that one line, 10% increase in defect costs, and a reduction in documentation time. That was especially generative AI. Decrease in defect rates was machine learning. The reduction in downtime, that was mostly generative AI. And then we did some training. So we launched interactive workshops for production and administrative teams already in that first year to practice with using these tools, generative AI and machine learning. Machine learning tools are easier to learn, but less customized for your needs. Generative AI needs to be highly customized to be effective. All right, what about year two? Year two is when we expanded this tool across all production lines using insights from the pilots from the first year. We deployed an integrated AI dashboard providing real-time updates on performance of all the production lines and quality metrics and scheduling of shifts. And we had automated alerts triggered for operational issues to enable rapid reallocation of resources as needed. We consolidated data across different departments to support faster and more data-driven decision-making. And we had continuous feedback mechanisms to improve generative AI applications. We also deployed AI-driven chatbots and virtual assistants for suppliers and customers of that manufacturing firm that provided real-time data and personalized insights for customers, helped reduce the burden on the support staff. Humans just got involved in more complex issues. We also refined workflows with automated report generation for all production lines and maintenance scheduling, which reduced, of course, administrative workload and helped us make sure that we're targeting the right machines to maintain. We retrained administrative staff to oversee AI outputs, and we achieved significant reductions in uncloud downtime, had more operational agility, and better safety. So here's the current outcome after the second year. Overall productivity improved by over 30%, so really good improvement, with reduced manual processing and optimized workloads responsible for that productivity. Quality control enhancements led to a 10% reduction in defects across the organization now. That improved customer satisfaction and reduced waste. Employee engagement was up by over 25% because the roles shifted from more repetitive tasks to strategic oversight, and we did some strategic reallocation of roles. There was overall a 15% reduction in non-core headcount from 2 years ago because those unable to adapt left and the remaining staff were generally upskilled. We had to make a couple of new hires of generative AI personnel who are going to be skilled with generative AI in IT. Okay, here are the plans for the future. Year three, we plan to roll out next generation autonomous AI agents. So we're increasingly seeing them come out, and next year, that's going to be in the upcoming year, we're planning to roll them out to analyze production reports and draft preliminary diagnostic reports. We plan to integrate them with ERP, CRM, and production databases to have real-time risk assessments of various upcoming problems and automate routine data processing to have human capacity for more strategic high-level decision-making. Of course, we're going to have humans in the loop to ensure accuracy because we can't fully rely on it. The anticipated benefits, we project additional productivity boost of about 20 to 30% with routine tasks automated by AI agents. We anticipate much quicker near instantaneous responses to supplier and customer inquiries with enhanced satisfaction and less support staff time required compared to what we're doing now with more non-agent AI tools. Now, we are planning to have a unified dashboard integration displaying all generative AI insights and ML insights alongside, of course, human review mechanisms. That will lay the foundation for deeper analytics going forward and advanced automation across all operations. Okay, so that's year 3. Year 4 is when we plan to embed more advanced predictive analytics to forecast equipment performance even better. We anticipate supply chain disruptions, so outside the organization. We'll monitor sensor data more continuously than we do right now to have proactive maintenance scheduling. We are also planning to have a pilot project of deploying human-like robots, which are definitely getting better right now. I mean, a number of factories are already using them. Tesla's using them. Other companies are using human-like robots. We figure in 2 years, they should be in a good enough state to use in a manufacturing plant with 200 staff, probably a little bit later than 200. So we'll initiate a pilot project equipped with computer vision and natural language capabilities that they will not only conduct basic labor, but they'll have quality control and inventory management abilities. We'll re-engineer production workflows with this in mind, integrating predictive analytics and robot insights, and we'll have automated suggestions for resource reallocation and alternative sourcing in real time for supply chain disruptions. We plan to have an additional productivity increase of 15 to 20% with reduced downtime and manual intervention. And we have operational cost reduction of 25 to 30%. As efficiency improves, we'll likely have reduced operational headcount by another 20 to 25%. Okay, so that's a manufacturing firm. How about professional services? So services, not manufacturing. I'll tell you about a professional services client, a law firm in the Northeast with about 100 people that hired me to help them leverage generative AI to transform legal processes, to reduce routine task time and boost overall efficiency. So again, the leadership trend anticipated that generative AI can transform legal processes. This was from a couple of years ago. This was something like 6 to 9 months after the release of ChatGPT. They wanted to reduce routine tasks and increase efficiency. So that was the initial aspiration. Again, I always form a task force with senior and junior attorneys this time, some paralegals, IT specialists, and HR, because we want to get representation from across the organization. We had a weekly meeting to map workflows for generative AI adoption, like legal research, document review, and contract drafting. We had a detailed auditing process using mapping and time tracking to document time for case research and drafting of documents. The audit helped reveal that legal research took an average of 20 to 40 hours per case, and that was definitely reducible. We already had some junior attorneys who were early adopters of generative AI who said they cut research time by like 50% or more. So we had a pilot project of deploying an AI legal research tools to scan databases and generate concise case law summaries. We cut research time by 30% on average in the first year for those who chose to participate. And that pilot automation for routine document drafting, like contracts, NDAs, briefs, was also a pilot project. So attorneys compared drafts created by AI and humans to build trust in the technology at first. And of course, then they did reviews without super fully comparing them word by word. We organized an interactive workshop for staff to practice using these generative AI tools. And that, by the way, was fully generative AI. There was no machine learning there. We had, again, drafting, research, and identifying legal precedents. Early training showed a 20 to 30% improvement in turnaround times. So this is really important. We had widespread integration of the next steps in the next year. So we had an upgraded legal research platform, which was integrated into the firm's case management system. We had an expanded automated document drafting to include contracts, litigation briefs, and risk assessment for complex cases. That enabled instant access to detailed legal analysis even during client meetings. So people could just type up what's going on and get that information. Then we rolled out new pilot projects in the second year with human review, of course, processing deposition transcripts into first draft briefs, summarizing lengthy court opinions, and so on. Now, we made sure to follow ABA guidelines. There was ABA guidelines in something like May 2024 to disclose use of generative AI to clients, which highlighted savings the clients are getting from generative AI. And we started changing the billing structure to routine tasks from hour billing to flat fees. We implemented an AI dashboard dashboard is a theme with real-time monitoring of case progress and workflow management. and we had automated alerts for approaching filing deadlines. The outcomes was minimized manual data entry and prompt quality checks. People make mistakes, and generative AI is a great tool to catch those. Improved immediate issue flagging as well. There was a 37% overall boost in productivity. So even better than manufacturing, because of course, this is all just dealing with content generation with legal fields, reducing manual processing and enhancing data retrieval. There was a 20% improvement in employee engagement because staff didn't have to do as much dumb work. We had a 10 to 15% reduction in non-core headcount, with administrative staff mainly retrained as AI supervisors. Some staff couldn't really adapt to this new role, so they departed. Next year was the introduction, our plans for the future. What we plan to do is, again, we introduce generative AI agents. So AI agents to autonomously perform routine legal tasks with some human review, like drafting preliminary legal documents. Where future initiatives include integrating autonomous agents with the firm's database for quick retrieval of case precedents, initial risk assessment on cases to provide attorneys with data-driven insights for client consultations. Now, next year, year 4, so the year after this one, we plan to have more customized predictive analytics to analyze historical case data and forecast legal outcomes. That we envision will help us to make better decisions on the cases that we take on. So we'll plan to integrate AI-driven recommendations into daily workflows to optimize case management and improve outcomes for clients. We'll have also a few dashboards for senior partners to look at the real-time risk assessments and suggest specific legal strategies. We expect legal case outcomes to improve by 15 to 20% as a result. With data-driven decision-making, that's going to be quite helpful. We project a reduction in costs by 25 to 30% for a more efficient use of resources, and we anticipate further headcount reduction with fewer junior lawyers needed and support staffs because senior associates and partners will automate more tasks. Don't plan to lay people off, but we just plan to not hire people who are not so necessary anymore. Now, we anticipate a productivity boost of 20 to 30% as agents take on more repetitive tasks, and we expect that client satisfaction will be higher because we have near instantaneous responses, personalized service, and better case outcomes. Okay, so that's part 1. Let's talk about understanding common challenges. So we talked about understanding generative AI and its specific benefits with some case studies. Common challenges come from psychological barriers, ranging from employee resistance to poor decision-making. Generative AI is a really innovative technology that's distinct from other transformation initiatives. So let's talk about some cognitive biases, some mistakes that leaders make in generative AI adoption. One is the status quo bias. It's a preference for maintaining current practices and a resistance to modifying established workflows that causes people to hesitate to experiment with generative AI-driven solutions and have difficulty in accepting generative AI-informed insights. So that's the status quo bias. Another is loss aversion, where people feel the fear of potential losses outweighing perceived gains. There's a reluctance to invest time and resources into adopting generative AI and an emphasis on potential negative outcomes, especially concerns about generative AI replacing human jobs, which results in resistance. So that's loss aversion. And finally, empathy gap. We tend to underestimate people's emotional reactions to generative AI changes, and leaders have difficulty in predicting how employees will resist generative AI. We tend to overlook the need for emotional support during transitions, and leaders don't think and sufficiently address the emotions. So there's a failure to address employee concerns empathetically and a misjudgment of the impact of generative AI on workplace relationships. So there's a neglect of providing adequate resources and training for employees. Now, thinking about these cognitive biases, which of these might be most problematic for generative AI adoption in your organization? Please go ahead. So there's a poll. You should be able to answer it. All right, great. So Overwhelmingly, the status quo bias is the most powerful one. So this is really important for you to think about, that status quo bias is the most important one, clearly. So think about this and apply it to your context, that the nearly two-thirds believe that status quo bias is the biggest challenge. All right. So let's talk about addressing these problems. Part 3, creating a safe learning environment. How do you create that safe learning environment to address the kind of cognitive biases I described? You want to encourage risk-taking and experimentation among your employees to reduce the fear of failure. You want to provide consistent support and feedback for them. For example, one thing you want to do is identify which of your employees are going to be early adopters of generative AI, like I mentioned, the junior employees at the firm, the law firm, and you want to pair them with people who want to adopt it. So we paired some employees at that law firm with who were junior employees with more senior associates, even partners, to help partners and senior associates learn from those junior employees who are already generative AI adopters. That facilitates knowledge sharing and skill development. It's built stronger professional relationships. So mid-sized tech company is an example, at one I worked with, where early adopter employees volunteered as peer mentors and trainers. They covered diverse generative AI topics from coding to content creation to prompting. And that was enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing across teams. So peer mentoring is a great tool for safe learning. Another is workshops. So having good workshops with hands-on workshops and seminars to provide in-depth training on generative AI tools and techniques to encourage practical application of learned skills. So thinking about workshops, that's going to be another valuable tool for you to use. Another tool is microlearning for a safe learning environment, which breaks down complex generative AI topics into more short and focused lessons. It uses videos, quizzes, and interactive content and allows people to learn at their own pace. And training, gamification, is another quite useful tool. It incorporates game-like elements with points and leaderboards, and that helps you provide rewards for people with badges, certificates, and other incentives. That creates a nice competitive and collaborative learning experience for folks. Now, you want to leverage data and analytics for learning. Track learning progress and outcomes effectively, use data to identify skills gaps and training needs, personalize learning experiences based on data insights, and continuously improve programs based on feedback and data. Promote continuous learning through a growth mindset, encouraging growth mindset among employees, have opportunities for ongoing education and development. That's really important for generative AI adoption. Recognize and reward learning achievements and integrate that learning into daily work routines. So thinking about daily work routines, that's part of building a learning culture, learning initiatives with the goals of your organization. What do you want to achieve? Make sure that your learning is aligned with that. Engage the leadership in promoting a learning culture and foster a collaborative and safe learning environment. Celebrate successes in milestones in the learning journey. Okay, so we talked about learning. Let's talk about communication and employee engagement. You want to have a clear explanation of generative AI benefits and how it will impact the various roles in the firm. Regularly update your folks on adoption of generative AI, the progress in that field. Use multiple channels. People are not going to respond to one channel only. Have meetings, emails, intranet. Make sure to have multiple channels for communication. So the mid-sized tech company that I mentioned earlier working with regular town hall meetings discussing various generative AI initiatives, and we had a Q&A session to address employee questions with transparent sharing of generative AI projects and milestones. So that's a good example of what you want to do. You want to make sure to address staff concerns and misconceptions, have open forums to discuss generative AI-related anxieties, provide factual information to counter myths, have early adopters who will talk about how great generative AI is and how much benefits they're getting from generative AI. So that's something to think about. How do you get employees involved effectively? You have cross-functional generative AI committees. I talked about the 2 case studies and the generative AI cross-functional committees that we formed there. Invite employees to participate in a variety of pilot programs to make sure that they get excited and engaged, and have employee feedback on whatever tools and processes you're using for generative AI. Empower employees to participate, create platforms for idea submission and innovation for them, recognize and reward their contribution to generative AI projects, and have a culture of collaboration and shared success for your employees to make sure that they participate effectively. Encourage supportive environments for experimentation. Have a culture that values innovation and experimentation. So have people test new methods of generative AI within the guidelines that you provide. Allow room for failure and learning from these mistakes. Provide resources and time for people to experiment. But how do you balance that with autonomy with the guidance that you provide for them? You want to have clear goals and expectations for generative AI projects with regular check-ins to monitor progress and provide feedback for folks. Encourage collaboration among the team to share insights effectively and provide continuous training and development opportunities for people over time. Now, I'm curious, how valuable do you think it would be to use these behavioral science-based results? Let's see. So these are behavioral science-based tools for addressing employee concerns. How valuable would it be to use these tools to address resistance to employee learning? In the meantime, Bill asks, for training, do you have links to websites or tools that offer tools and methods you described? Yes, so that'll be part of the resources. I think I gave the link. You'll be able to have a poll indicating that you want the resources, or you can just click on the link that's in the chat to get the resources. And again, for those who are watching the webinar after the fact, it's going to be tinyurl.com/DAE event. Okay, most people participated. Great. All right, so we see that over half the people would find it highly valuable and the rest find it moderately valuable. That's excellent. Good. I'm glad that you're finding it valuable. All right. What about generative AI risks? How do you address those? Map out your data privacy and security risks first. So we'll talk about data privacy and security. Conduct regular security audits and assessments of generative AI systems. Got the slides off. Okay. So conduct regular security audits and assessments of generative AI systems and train employees on best practices for data privacy. So that's going to be really important for you to think about. So I worked with a European bank as an example, where we developed an AI-driven customer service tool and conducted comprehensive privacy impact assessments, and we ensured compliance with the European GDPR by anonymizing customer data that resulted in enhanced trust and compliance with regulations. Now, most of you will not need something nearly as advanced, but that's an example of something to think about in terms of compliance and regulations with whatever data privacy and security needs that you have. Then, addressing bias in generative AI algorithms. Identify and mitigate biases in generative AI models. This is a big issue. Use diverse data sets for training generative AI and regularly review and update your algorithms to implement fairness and accountability checks. So that's going to be quite important. There are a number of situations where bad decision-making comes from having poorly trained algorithms. Have compliance with legal and regulatory standards. Stay updated with evolving generative AI regulations. Right now, for example, we have decreasing generative AI regulation burden with the Trump administration. We'll see what happens going forward because we have a number of states that are stepping up to choose to implement generative AI regulations because the federal government is decreasing generative AI regulations. So you want to be aware of what's happening in all the states in which you function. Engage legal and compliance teams in generative AI projects and document processes in generative AI decision-making. Ensure transparency and accountability in how you use generative AI. There's also long-term risks to think about. Potential loss of control over generative AI systems, like AI surpassing human intelligence, superintelligence. So these are risks to mitigate. So for example, if you think about, let's say, in a couple of years, a secretive East Asian hedge fund tells its advanced generative AI model from which it has jailbroken, meaning removing safety guidelines, it tells it to make money in the stock market. Well, what's a good way to make money in the stock market? A good way to make money in the stock market very quickly is to short a company that's going to crash. And a good way to make sure a company crashes is to have a cyber attack on the company in pretty serious one. So for example, when Saudi Aramco in 2012 already had to spend a week replacing all its workstations because of Iraqi hackers. Now that was in 2012, and we know there's been many, many more cyber attacks going on more recently. So if that happens in a couple of years, which it's very, very viable with the current scenario going on, this is a pretty serious risk. And there are plenty of other risks, like that's just economic motivations. There are ideological risks like pandemics. And we know that there's been a research paper that came out in 2024 that showed that generative AI can create the future models of generative AI can create very strong potential for pandemic risk. So we have a lot of risks associated with generative AI that need to be mitigated. So you want to make sure that the vendors that you work with, to push them to implement strict oversight and governance frameworks and conduct thorough risk assessments and scenario planning to make sure that you're getting the generative AI tools that you're getting are only generative AI tools that have been really heavily invested into safety so that they can't be jailbroken easily. Many tools, unfortunately, right now, the development and quickness of the tools is prioritized over safety. And that's a long-term risk that we need to think about. Ensure that human in the loops are there for critical decisions and that people can evaluate and address various problems that can occur. Advocate for international cooperation in AI safety standards so that no secretive East Asian hedge fund can launch this sort of thing without government intervening. Okay, now thinking about these kinds of risks, which of these risks are you most concerned about in terms of generative AI? Please go ahead and vote. Most people participated. Let's see. All right, so we have 2/3 concerned about data security and privacy, and 1/5 concerned about long-term and existential risks. So in terms of the biggest risks. So that's something for you to think about and realize where the risks are. I think it's quite important and valuable to address both of those risks. And you as business leaders can address both of those risks by making sure that you advocate for appropriate generative AI tools and usage. All right, let's talk about a roadmap for generative AI adoption, what you can do. First, identify manual tasks that generative AI can streamline effectively. Evaluate your inefficiency and bottlenecks in operations. There's the well-known O model in economic performance, where the whatever bottleneck is the issue will be whatever process is the slowest will determine the overall speed of the process of your organization. Analyze employee workload and areas for automation. Map out your current technology to make sure that it can integrate effectively with generative AI, and gather feedback from teams on pain points and opportunities to motivate them to focus on the tasks that are most important. So, have clear AI goals and objectives. Make sure it's aligned with business priorities. I've seen companies that are launching generative AI just because they want to stay ahead of the pack, and it's not very aligned with business priorities. That does not work very well. Have measurable success criteria, efficiency gains, cost savings, whatever you want to accomplish, not just how much are my employees engaging with generative AI. That's a good medium-term criteria, but it's not the outcome that you want to measure. Determine generative AI's role in enhancing productivity and decision-making over time, and have balancing of short-term wins, which you definitely want to have, with long-term strategic goals for using generative AI. Ensure that AI adoption supports employees and customers alike. Engage key stakeholders. Involve your leadership, your department heads, and end users early. Make sure that they feel engaged and involved with the process. Communicate the benefits of generative AI and address the concerns that people might have proactively. Train employees to work effectively with these tools and appoint champions who are early adopters. I can guarantee to you, you already have some early adopters who are using generative AI to drive adoption. Foster collaboration with a task force of IT, HR, operations, whoever is involved. Develop a clear, structured roadmap and timeline. Like I described, the roadmap and timeline for the two clients I worked with in manufacturing and the law firms, professional services, have a timeline for the future, what you want to do. Break AI adoption into manageable phases with clear milestones, check-in points, and clear pilots, and then scaling up. Assign responsibility for generative AI implementation and oversight, so have a team that does so. Plan for iterative testing and refinement, so with pilot projects of generative AI tools. Ensure that there is flexibility to adjust based on feedback and performance of generative AI tools. Select the right tools. Make sure that your AI solutions are based on your business needs and that they're scalable as you expand the pilot project. Prioritize tools that integrate smoothly with your existing systems. You don't want to change too many systems at once. Test AI solutions in pilots, of course, very important, and consider cost effectiveness and long-term sustainability as you scale it up. Select the right vendors. Evaluate vendor reliability, security, and compliance standards. We talked about risks. Get external AI advisors with expertise, especially those that worked with Vistage members previously and know what kind of activities go on Vistage members, what Vistage members need. Track progress with clear performance metrics. For example, efficiency, cost savings, quality of decision-making. Monitor employee adoption rates and satisfaction with AI tools. But again, that's not nearly as important as the eventual efficiency, productivity gains, and so on. Use data to identify areas for improvement and training needs, and have benchmarks for productivity gains driven by AI. Have regular reviews of AI outcomes and adjust your strategy accordingly over time. Commit to continuous optimization as part of adjusting your strategy. Have ongoing feedback from employers and stakeholders. Adopt AI models based on new insights and evolving needs. Right now, for example, OpenAI's Deep Research is a great tool that can cut out a lot of research work. So think about what's going on, what kind of new tools are there, and so have people who are monitoring these tools. Invest in continuous training and skill development over time, and have updates on these AI advancements, as I mentioned. Ensure generative AI remains a strategic asset. It's not just a one-time initiative. Continuous investment over time. Okay, let's talk about the key takeaways. Address challenges and cognitive biases, which we discussed earlier in the presentation. Foster a learning culture and a psychologically safe environment. Gain employee engagement and buy-in early in the process. Mitigate risks and ensure compliance, and develop a comprehensive strategy for generative AI adoption. Track progress with key metrics and continuous improvement over time. My clients find that it works best to start with small and manageable AI pilot projects, and short-term wins are what will help inspire your team to unlock the full potential of generative AI. All right, so if you're watching this webinar as a recording, make sure to go to the link that's under my name to get the resources, tinyurl.com/DAE event. And that's going to be a link to the slides, a copy of my best-selling book, ChatGPT for Thought Leaders and Content Creators, Unlocking the Potential of Generative AI for Innovative and Effective Content Creation, and a free coaching for integrating these strategies into your work. So again, that's going to be, for those who are watching as a recording, that's going to be the link. And for those that at tinyurl.com/DAE event, for the rest of you who are watching right now, please go ahead and vote in the poll indicating that you want my resources. And so again, vote in the poll. If you're present right now, you don't need to go to the link. But if you are watching this as a recording, or if for some reason you can't vote in the poll, go to the link at tinyurl.com/DAE event. Again, tinyurl.com/DAE event. I'll also put it in the chat. And I'll be happy to take any questions at this stage.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a lot to think about, and thank you for making the slides and the book available. So please look at those resources. And we have so many questions, but I'm going to focus them on some specific themes that have come up more often. Um, One question we have is, one of the things that you recommend is the committee, and I have heard this from other experts in our community as well, is who are the people who should come together to be governing this? And we have Jerome, who shared that he's resisting creating committees, wants to
Mhm.
think about it in a different way. So could you share, is there another approach, or is there a way to overcome that view that, managing this by committee is going to be a challenge?
Hmm. So let's talk about the pros and cons of committees. So the cons of committees is that it causes things to go slower, and it causes there to be more potential for resistance. The pros of committees is that it gets you buy-in and input from different parts of your organization, and that it creates a situation where you get data from different parts of your organization. It helps you avoid bad decisions. So if you don't have a committee, what will happen is that your initial implementation will go faster, but you will bog down going forward. So that is the trade-off that you're making. I can guarantee to you, Jerome, that if you don't have a committee of people who are excited and engaged, then you will not get buy-in from the different folks at your organization, and that you'll be making both more mistakes and facing more resistance. With generative AI, resistance is much more dangerous than with other digital transformation projects. Because again, for the reasons I mentioned before, people have a lot more anxiety about this. They're a lot more resistant to using it. That's one. And second, there are a lot more use cases that you need to discover that are particular and specific to your organization, to your unique set of circumstances, that are going to be much better discovered if people are excited and are engaged with using generative AI. So that's a very important approach to take. So you certainly don't have to have a committee, but that's the reason that you might want to think about a committee. Now, for employee resistance and anxiety, you want to be very transparent and open about what you will be doing. So I mentioned before that in the two client case studies, we both had a reduction of headcount, and in neither of those cases did we fire people. It did happen that a number of people left who couldn't adapt to using generative AI as a tool, kind of natural turnover. So there was something like 15 to 20% turnover at each organization over 2 years, which is very, very reasonable. Where we were not really hiring additional people, except a couple of generative AI specialists at the manufacturing firm. We didn't need to hire any at the law firm. So you will have natural reduction in headcount. Now, you can commit to not firing anyone just because you're using generative AI. That will reduce anxiety, but you need to communicate that people who are not going to be willing to use this tool and who are not going to be sufficiently quick in adapting it will not be able to have a job at the company in the long term or in the medium term or in the short term, depending on your situation. So that can help create an incentive for people to get an education and invest into using generative AI. Still, without a committee, I think you'll find that the long-term going, while the short-term going will be quicker, the long-term going will be slower.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Gleb. I want to make sure that we're talking about security, because as your poll
Mhm.
showed, that is one of the biggest concerns of our community. And how do you best protect sensitive data? For example, does a paid version of ChatGPT is safe for a company to use, or are there other considerations or actions to take?
Sure. So yeah, you want an enterprise version of something like ChatGPT. And so ChatGPT is fine. Microsoft Copilot is probably even a little better because it'll be integrated with all your tools. But what you want to do is make sure that you have an enterprise version of whatever tool that you're using. So not a free tool, but having an enterprise tool, and you want to make sure that your tech team, so if you're not using if you're just paying for it, but not using the enterprise version. So ChatGPT has an enterprise version. It also has a paid version. If you just use a paid version, but not an enterprise version, you want to make sure that you opt out of data sharing with that each employee knows and does opting out of data sharing with the OpenAI. So it's a little bit more complex if you just use a paid version without using an enterprise version. So that's why I encourage folks to get an enterprise version, because then your IT can manage those things by default.
Excellent. That ties into the loss aversion, a different take on loss aversion, keeping your data and confidential documents safe. Um, from our research, we know that 14% report that they are providing training on policy and governance and what to use. So I think there's a great opportunity there with
Mhm.
all of the different AI vendors and capabilities out there. How can you determine what Gen AI suppliers might be bad actors versus what are credible? How can you identify those that are the mainstream safe platforms?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What you want to do is you want to look at, of course, platforms like Microsoft Copilot, or let's say Anthropic, which is integrated into AWS, so with Amazon. You want to see what's integrated with already major systems and avoid tools like DeepSeek. I've been surprised by how many people use the Chinese app DeepSeek without realizing that all of their data is provided to the Chinese government very easily without controls. And so thinking about, free is not always free. And this is definitely a case where a free tool is going to be costly because that data can be used against you. So you want to use something that's associated with a trusted provider like Amazon, like AWS, Google, Gemini, right? Again, paid versions of all of these tools. And there are a number of providers who work specifically and explicitly and are approved by these tools. So for example, I mentioned that I'm working on my book for Georgetown University Press. I just did an interview yesterday as a case study with Rick Madan from Tech Systems, TEK Systems. And they work with AWS, they work with Azure, and they specifically are approved by them to provide integration services on generative AI tools. So you want to see what large platform providers approve certain vendors and work with those approved vendors.
Yeah, there's a lot of different apps out there that we could use, and between
Mhm.
ChatGPT versus Copilot versus some of the others, how can you determine which app is the best for different use cases? How do you
Mhm.
navigate switching between apps and making them talk to each other?
So you want to think about how you're spending your generative AI budget. What I typically recommend that companies do is choose one provider and stick to that provider, because then they don't have to pay for an enterprise version of two apps. So for example, Microsoft Copilot is powered by OpenAI's tools. So you can use either OpenAI's tools or Microsoft tool. If you're a Microsoft company, if you use Microsoft Teams and so on, you should just use Microsoft Pilot. If you're a Google company and use Google Docs and so on, you can just rely on Gemini. If you don't have one of those, if you use Slack or something, you can choose between others like an Anthropic, Claude. If you work with AWS, so they come with an Anthropic, for example. So that's going to be a good tool. So just choose one, invest into it, and then you don't have to spend don't spend additional money just because a tool is a little bit more hypey at the moment. And what you want to do is all of these tools will catch up to each other within, several months. Right now, probably the best tool for, let's say, research is going to be OpenAI's Deep Research. But Google has a pretty good research tool as well. And the only way that using the AI tool the only companies that I would recommend at this stage using the OpenAI tool, if they are already paying for Google, is something like a law firm, because a law firm needs to have a deep report. Or if you are an M&A and you want to look at cutting time on the due diligence, that will be worthwhile. But to get the OpenAI's deep research, that's $200 a month. Now, I pay that because it's worth it for me to do that. But you don't want probably every employee at your company to have to pay for an extra $200 a month for the OpenAI tool. That's only several months ahead of something that other tools are going to provide pretty quickly.
Excellent. Well, there are many more questions, and we talked before the session that you'd be willing to look at them, and perhaps we'll have a follow-up blog to answer some of them. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, Dr. Gleb. And as he mentioned, his materials, his book are available. And for those who are looking at very specific functions for small businesses, he did, we mentioned his book about innovation and content creation. That seems like a great way to get started as well. So we'll be sending a link to today's recording within 24 hours. And as Dr. Gleb mentioned, you can opt in for the slides and his book. And Dr. Gleb's also a regular contributor to the Vistage Research Center and the AI Resource Center, so you can find a series of blogs there that delve into some of his insights. Few other things I want to share with you. Look for our latest Vistage research report available later this month on Gen AI, automating the knowledge worker. And this features data from our confidence index surveys about how your peers across Vistage are leveraging AI, as well as insights from other experts in the Vistage community. For our members, please note that the Vistage exclusive presentation featuring Angela Duckworth is available to watch yourselves with your groups and with your teams through May 30th. And finally, mark your calendar for our next Vistage exclusive featured speaker, Seth Godin, coming to the Vistage community Friday, August 22nd. So thank you everyone for your time today. Be safe and be well.